Hi, my name's Jeremy Heynen. I'm one of the creators of Off International, the new Okanagan Film Fest. I'm sitting here having a conversation over Skype with writer-director Jay Duplass, whose films include The Puffy Chair, Baghead, Cyrus, Kevin, and Jeff Who Lives at Home. What was it that initially inspired you to want to pursue a career in films and be a filmmaker?
For me, it was, there were a couple of big turning points. The first of it being, the general baseline is just that my family and my brother and I have always loved movies. In 1987, when we saw Raising Arizona in a movie theater, we were on vacation, I think, at a beach location, and that'll tell you a lot about our families. We went to the movies when we were at the beach. We're at a beautiful beach, and we're like, let's go sit inside a controlled, dark environment that we could certainly do at home while we're at the beach. And so we saw Raising Arizona, and I think it was the first time that Mark and I realized that human beings made this film, And even though we could not see them, we kind of had a sense of who they were. And it was the first time that I realized that, movies don't just come pumped in over this thing called cable in our neighborhood. Movies actually are made by human beings. So that was the first big turning point. I guess the second turning point was when I was at school at the University of Texas. I was studying psychology and humanities, and I was obsessed with movies as usual. And I was about to enter academia in psychology, and my mentor at the time, she kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, academia is not what it once used to be. It's pretty competitive. It's tough life. So if you really love this film thing, you ought to really think about it. And it was at the time I was in Austin, and it was early to mid 90s, and Richard Linklater and Robert Rodriguez had made. They were kind of the founding fathers of this new micro budget cinema, I think, and I was kind of sitting in it there, and so I just kind of got excited about it and spent an extra year in school, and eventually it took off. It was the extra steps of that process of human beings made this film. Those steps in Austin were, human beings made these films in their houses. They literally, they did not need the help of studios, and they made it through. And those guys were gods in Austin, and they still are, and they should be. They're now they've become sort of like gods everywhere, and they're in textbooks, But at the time, for me, I didn't really know that they would become the directors that they have become. I didn't know that they would be as successful. I just knew that, these dudes who would come visit our film classes every once in a while, they were doing it, and they were psyched about it, and, I like their movies. So it's kind of what encouraged me to kind of jump off of that cliff, so to speak.
Your films have something very unique going on with them as far as how real they are. Performances, the writing of the characters, the dialogue, and that they're very much filmed like documentaries. How did that style develop? Where did it come from?
It was an accident. I think all good things, it is something that happened to us. The short version is that, we were trying to make. And when we were in film school, we wanted to be the Coen brothers, and we tried to make those, very controlled, intelligent films, and we were terrible at it. And we realized very quickly, don't try to be the Coen brothers, because they already exist, and they're already really good at what they do. They pretty much got the corner on the market in being the Coen brothers. And, so we spent, 10 years making bad films, trying to find our voice and trying to, I call it now trying to find our voice, but really all it was just trying to make something that didn't suck, And then one day in 2002, we were moping around our apartment, and Mark said, look, we're gonna make a movie today. And I was like, well, we don't have a Super 8, we don't have 16 millimeter film, we don't have a camera, we don't have lights, we don't have a crew. And he's like, I don't care, we're just gonna use mom and dad's camera, so come up with something, And I came up with this idea that had happened to me a week before, which was that I had tried to record the outgoing message of my answering machine back when we had answering machines. And it took me like an hour, and I had like a breakdown at the end of it. I had like an emotional breakdown, you know? And you're laughing, it's funny now, but like at the time it was freaking devastating. Thinking to myself, like, I can't even get this goddamn answering machine message right. What am I gonna ever accomplish in this life, you know? And you know, those kinds of moments prior to that point were moments that Mark and I had always talked about privately. You know, these like really embarrassing things that we do, and the things that we say to our spouses, and you know, think crazy shit our friends do, and we would, you know, cringe and then laugh afterwards about it. And it wasn't until we recorded that film in one 20-minute take on a $3 tape, we made something good. We finally made something that we didn't even know what it was, you know, but it definitely was representative of the private conversations and our very private, specific sense of humor. We were in like Meisner acting classes at the time, and we were very obsessed with just doing only things that were real, you know. And so I had kind of had in the back of my head, you know, I really wanted to just set up very real scenarios and not control them, not light them in very controlled ways, just light the set generally, and then, you know, film real moments like as a documentarian would. And This Is John was the name of that film. That was our first film, and you know, that was a one take. It was a 20-minute take that we cut down to 7 minutes, and you know, Sundance called us and said, the guy who called us said it was his favorite film that year, and we thought it was a joke. We thought it was the Zellner brothers messing with us. I think it's a while to like realize that person actually was from the Sundance Institute. So I'm so glad that it happened, because you know, when we made that film, I was on the cusp of turning 30, and you know, really getting to that point where I'd given it like a decade. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know how much longer I can do this to myself and to my parents, and you know what I mean? So luckily it was, you know, in the nick of time. I have a hard time. It's just, I don't mean to be critical, it's just how my brain works. Like most movies, when I watch them, I don't believe, it's very hard for me to believe that George Clooney is having a hard time finding love. You know? I have a hard time when people are just behaving in ways that I've never witnessed. I guess I'm obsessed with human behavior. It's something that I watch all the time. It's like what I do when I'm in airports. It's what I do all day. It's just something that I'm kind of like just built to be a student of, and because I'm so into it, I guess, it kind of ruins a lot of movies for me, you know, a lot of movies that have a lot of like hyperbolic, you know, acting to it. I don't know, doesn't work for me. It's weird though, because like I love the Coen brothers. They're probably my favorite filmmakers, and they have sort of like a heightened sense of reality, but their execution is so impeccable that it becomes like this other piece of art. I do find myself watching movies a lot of the times and thinking to myself, this is not how people behave, and I'm bored because this is just some idea that a director has, you know. It might have something to do with my personality too, is that I'm not, like, I think a lot of movies employ fantasy and employ people's desire to become or to imagine themselves as someone different, or as like a superhero or whatever it might be. And I don't have those desires. Like they're almost nil in me. So I guess I'm more interested in empathizing or sympathizing than in fantasizing, you know?
When making the transition, going from a smaller film like Baghead to a film like Cyrus, where all of a sudden you're working with stars like John C. Reilly, Jonah Hill, Marissa Tomei. I mean, in that transition, how much of a challenge was it for you, and how much did things change?
It changed enormously, you know, because Mark and I were cavemen pushing lights around and grunting and, you know, figuring things out in the moment, you know. But on Cyrus, when, you know, a studio's paying for the movie and there's millions of dollars involved, you have to have a lot of conversations about why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you really don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You're doing it because unseen forces are pushing you to do it, you know? So that can be very tricky. That was the hardest part for us. We were very careful with like crew size, you know, you're like 50 people instead of 7. We like the actors to outnumber the crew. It's basically them doing things in a house and me filming them like a documentarian, as we usually did. You know, with Jeff Who Lives at Home specifically, like Cyrus is a movie we could have made for, you know, a few $100,000. But Jeff Who Lives at Home is not. That's a script we wrote a while back and, you know, never knew we would ever make it because it has some elements in it. I mean, you really can't make that movie for less than, you know, $10 million. So that was a big thing for Jeff, and that, you know, for us, we do see making studio films and making small ones still. I think the best advice that I can give is just make movies, you know. Don't raise money, because if you raise money, then you become a fundraiser, you know. The reality is if you make a 3-minute film and it's great and it is unique in voice, it will go to festivals. A film that is well executed and that has a unique voice is a rare thing. It's kind of like the answer to every question at every film festival panel is make a good film, and it will pave the way. You're synthesizing an enormous amount of skill sets, you know, directing actors, lighting, sound, editorial, writing. I mean, it's just like 70 elements, and if one of them goes bad, your movie's probably not going to work. It's weird, but people expect to wake up and, like, you know, take a shit and a great movie comes out. Another myth is I've seen a lot of movies, therefore I should be able to make a good movie. You know what I mean? Like, the craft of plotting and storytelling, it's like, it's work. It's hard work.
Big release happening. March 16th.
Yeah.
Jeff Who Lives at Home. What can you tell us about this film?
The film is about, it's about family, like most of our films are about. It's about relationships, and it has a lot to do with fate versus chance, and whether or not there are, you know, stronger forces working in this world, or whether or not we're just, like, you know, subject to the whims of fate. Just sort of spiritually that we've been talking about the film is that, you know, most of the time our lives are pretty boring, and we're just grinding through what we have to do to earn our living and to eat and to live. But every once in a while you have a day where magical things seem to be happening, and that's what this film is about. And it's about a character who desperately needs to believe that there's more to this world than what meets the eye, and on this particular day it seems to be happening for him, and it's whether or not it really is happening, and whether or not it really matters whether it is happening or not, and maybe it is just, you know, our outlook on it. So it's very, like, sort of like spiritually based film, but, you know, there's tons of relationship stuff, and, you know, it's Jason Segel and Ed Helms, so it's funny as hell at the same time.